Great, good afternoon. We're delighted to be joined by our guest, Ghulam Isaczai, who is the resident and humanitarian coordinator in Iraq. As you'll recall, the Secretary General was just in Baghdad a few weeks ago for the closure of the UN political mission in Iraq, and our guest will speak to you about what happens next. Please.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Stefan, for this opportunity. And let me actually start with the Secretary General visit and repeat a quote. He said, "For those who lived through the troubled early years of the transition, today Iraq is unrecognizable and unremarkable. A country at peace with increased security and a clear determination to win the battle of development." So I'm here today actually to focus a little bit more on the UN transition and UN posture in Iraq from mission-led to a more development anchor partnership. And allow me at the beginning to also talk a little bit about the context of which we are operating and moving in this sort of very remarkable transformation in Iraq in the past 2 decades. Iraq has, in the past 2 decades, has changed a lot in terms of both its security and development posture. The country has increasing confidence in its institution, and also regional standing, and also moving steadily towards greater stability. Let me just quote a few statistics. I think it's relevant here. We have now witnessed in the past 5 years a reduction in poverty from 20% in 2018 to 17.5% in 2024-2025, as proven by the recent statistic and census data. Preliminary report also suggests that Iraq HDI may have reached at a point where it may qualify as a high human development country, or puts it in that category. After 4 decades, Iraq also launched a nationwide census, and this data, the data that came from the census, is increasingly important for us as the UN and also development partner to do better targeting and also to support Iraq's development needs. And the census put Iraq's population at 46 million, of which 60% is under the age of 25, and also pointed towards more of a urbanization trend, which puts more pressure on services in the cities. Also, it's of note here that improved security has enabled the return of 5 million internally displaced people. And although there are still some 100,000 IDPs, mostly the Yazidi population remain in camps in the Kurdistan region, but most of those who stay in the camps is not because of insecurity, but it's mostly because of issue of housing and civil identification cards and other development-related issues. Also, I think it's very important for us to recognize Iraq's role in the returning of its citizens from Northeast Syria. To date, 23,000 have been returned successfully to Iraq, and the UN is very much involved in the return of those Iraqi citizens. As you know, there's been an increasingly difficult issue for the world, and I think Iraq needs to be commended for taking that decision to return the majority of those citizens. Also, and I will finish here on the context and move to the UN transition, I think one of the other important milestones was that Iraq successfully held its sixth parliamentary election on November 11 last year. Again, the UN very much was involved technically in supporting the Electoral Commission. And I think what's also striking is that we saw an impressive 56% turnout. That is a 12% increase over the previous election. And also we saw a large number of women candidates. Roughly 1/3 of the candidates were women who were competing for 329 seats, of which 84 were secured for women under the quota system. Now, in terms of the UN transition, as I mentioned earlier, after 2 decades of very successful engagement with the government of Iraq, the United Nations Assistance Mission, or UNAMI, concluded its mandate on 31st December 2025. The Secretary General was in Iraq to mark that milestone and to emphasize the fact that the UN is not leaving Iraq. The UN is staying in Iraq. We have 25 UN agencies that operate under the resident coordinator system to support Iraq's development needs. Now, what we are seeing is that our presence in Iraq is shifting from a more mission-led and also political orientation to more development focus, and that is to support Iraq's socioeconomic needs, but also to reinforce a lot of the work that was done in the past 2 decades to sustain and to those gains and continue to support Iraq's institutions. We have also been recently very pleased that Iraq signed the UN cooperation framework. That's our 5-year plan for the next 5 years before the mission ended. And this 5-year cooperation and partnership framework focuses again on 4 key pillars of economic reform, social protection and service delivery, environment and climate change, and also governance, human rights, and rule of law. Of course, the UN is operating in a very constrained funding environment, and we have now positive indication that Iraq will contribute to the implementation of this new cooperation framework, which has been costed around over $1 billion over 5 years. And again, that shows increasing partnership and ownership by the government of Iraq to become a donor after being a recipient for many years of humanitarian and development aid. So we intend to establish a partnership fund and work with the government of Iraq in its implementation. Let me leave it here and happy to take a few more questions.
Thank you, Ghulam. Yes, please, Ephraim.
Thank you so much. My name is Ephraim Kosaifi with Arab News Daily. I have a couple of questions. First, on the Yazidi, the 100,000 Yazidis remaining in camps. Why is that? You spoke of millions being coming back home. Why? Can you elaborate on the reasons why they're still in camps and they haven't been able to return? Second, when you speak of, this is a quick one, when you speak of the northeast Syria repatriations, are you talking about Al-Hol camp and the other one as well? And what would you say also, you spoke very positively about all the developments. What would you say, I'm here, by the way. What would you say are some of the remaining concerns or obstacles in this development phase, as you call it? Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So the Yazidi population actually is roughly 90% of that 100,000. So we can say, probably 90,000 because that's the full population that was still remaining in 21 camps. I think some of the challenges that remain relates to housing. Some of it is also understanding an agreement between the Kurdistan regional government and also the federal government of Iraq to implement the Sinjar agreement that was also facilitated by the UN. So there are obviously no inhibition for those who wants to voluntarily return, but I think the government needs to do more in terms of providing financial support and facilitate their return. And as you know, that they're coming mostly from Sinjar, which is a very complicated area in bordering Syria. With regard to Al-Hol, with regard to those 23,000, they were mostly returned from Al-Hol and Al-Rosh camps in northeast Syria. And I believe there will be still probably another 2,000 to 3,000 left, which we at this point really don't know what their intention is to return or not, but I think the vast majority of them have returned and are under the process of reintegration. In terms of the development challenges, I think that's why we are here. I think one of the most critical challenge remains climate change and water scarcity, especially in the south, where, I mean, Iraq actually is one of the most impacted countries in the region, and in fact some statistics suggest that the temperature would rise twice as much in Iraq, 2 to 3 degrees Celsius by 2050. So I think there's a need for adaptation measures and also mitigation measures, and that's where we work with the government, and also perhaps more efficient and integrated water management to make sure that the population use water in a more effective and efficient way. The other challenges are, I think one of the other is economic diversification. Of course, as you know, Iraq is very much dependent, almost 90% of its revenue is coming from oil, and shifting and transitioning to a non-oil-based economy is quite a challenge, and it would require time. But again, the government has taken some positive steps to address that. They've launched a 2050 vision, which is focusing on largely on how to boost and revive the agriculture sector, promote tourism, and also manufacturing. The Development Road project, which is planned to connect the Gulf with Europe, is expected to bring a lot of new jobs and diversification in terms of trade, as well as also Iraq's effort to increase its export on non-oil sector. And again, government has taken some steps to provide incentive for exporters to increase that. So, and then, of course, in the area of civil service reform is another area where, again, a large part of the population is dependent on public sector wage bill and pension and other social subsidies. That, of course, consume quite a large part of the revenue and the budget. So there is a need for civil service reform or public administration reform in that respect.
Thank you. Ahmed, please, and then...
Thank you so much for the briefing. This is Ahmed Ali with Sphinx News TV. You spoke quite a bit about the United Nations stance on wanting to see a unified and peaceful political transition within Iraq. So I wanted to ask you a question that seems particularly relevant now, as it could potentially further fragment the state's internal affairs. The last 2 weeks or so have seen members of the Trump administration speak on newly restored relations with Iraq, championing the slogan, "Make Iraq Great Again." The Trump administration has suggested their attempt is to restore economic strength and military alliance with Baghdad following their parliamentary elections. I'm just curious what you make of these comments and whether you believe a restored relationship between the U.S. and Iraqi government in this fragile time is in the best interest of both the Iraqi people and Iraq's political consolidation right now. Thank you.
Well, I cannot comment on the U.S. administration, but I can say this, that Iraq has really done well in the last 2 years to maintain a balanced policy in terms of its relationship both in the region but also with the West. And I think a lot of credit goes again to Iraq to not entangle itself in the regional tension, and I think they've done a good job. So We as a UN are there now to support Iraq's socio-economic development. It's a sovereign nation. It can decide how it wishes to manage its relationship with its neighbors and also the broader international community.
Thank you. Farnoosh then Namo.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, just because both Steph and several other UN officials have used the peacekeeping mission and the UN operations in Iraq as an example of how peacekeeping can work and how a success story. I wonder, given this current political moment and also the UN, financial situation, how have you found that when you talk about what has happened in Iraq and the UN mission there, has that, how have you tried to focus that on making sure people see that there is good that can come from these operations? There are examples of this working in certain parts of the world.
Yeah, I think Iraq, as we've said it repeatedly in the Secretary General, is really truly a success story for the UN, for the international community. But I think a lot of the success and credit goes to the Iraqis themselves. They have really done a remarkable job to stabilize the country. The UN political mission in Iraq was not a peacekeeping mission. It was more of a political mission, which was established as per the Security Council resolution, and it ended at the request of Iraq, government of Iraq, recognizing also, I think, the Security Council member state recognized improvements on all aspects of Iraq. So I would say that in the current financial environment, I think it's a positive step. I mean, no UN mission or presence is permanent. I think we're always there at the request of the member state, and once that job is done, we transition to a new phase of partnership. So as I said, our partnership and relationship with Iraq has not ended. It's just transformed to more focusing on institution building, helping Iraq achieve its SDGs, and also sustaining the gain that has been achieved over the past 2 decades.
Thank you, Namo.
Thank you so much for this briefing. This is Namo Abdullah with Rudaw Media Network. I have a couple of questions, actually 3 questions. The first one: how does your diminished presence in Iraq because of UNAMI's closure change your priorities? And the second one, on the Yazidis, you said there are still around 100,000 of them living in camps. It's been nearly 11 years since they were subjected to genocide by the Islamic State, sexual enslavement. How does that make you feel as a UN official that these people continue to be homeless and the Iraqi officials haven't done enough to find them accommodation? And don't you believe that the United Nations should have pressed Iraqi officials harder to do something about these people? And the last question is on UNAMI. What do you believe is the single greatest achievement of UNAMI in Iraq? Thank you.
Well, I mean, on your first question, maybe I can combine your first and second question, third question on diminished presence of the UN and how that will reshift our priority. As I mentioned earlier, UNAMI did what it could to help Iraq where it is, and the responsibility is now shifting to the government in most cases, and also to the UN when it comes to residual humanitarian needs and development. We just have to prioritize now our engagement based on the government's national priorities. The government has a national development plan that's for 5 years. We actually signed our cooperation framework that focuses specifically on key economic and social priorities. We certainly cannot be a panacea to each challenges that Iraq has, but I think we really need to focus and become more targeted. Now, in terms of UNAMI's single biggest achievements, I think we just have to really go back and do a study and then highlight it. But there are some notable achievements. I mentioned the last parliamentary election was primarily undertaken by the government of Iraq or by the Independent Electoral Commission. And in my meeting with one of the commissioners, he said that we could not have done this 5, 10, or 20 years ago. So thank you, UNAMI and the UN for the support. And of course, the return of 5 million IDPs and many other democratic institutions that are there have been supported with not just UNAMI, but also the more integrated support of the UN system and also the UN funds and programs that have been in Iraq. So we've done our part, but again, a lot of that credit can go to the Iraqi people and political system. On the Yazidis, again, it's a very sensitive and complicated issue. We continue to advocate for the return of all IDPs. There are still some IDPs that are in federal Iraq that haven't been able to return. These are, at the end of the day, Iraqis, and Iraq needs to do more to facilitate their voluntary return. We have been working with the government of Iraq for the past few years and have developed a durable solution roadmap. And this roadmap, if implemented, could contribute to their return. Now, having said that, there's still lots of administrative and bureaucratic challenges, especially related to compensation funds and so forth. But I do hope that as Iraq is forming a new government, the new government would take this issue seriously. And as the UN, we will continue to advocate for their return to their places of origin or solutions that will be more dignified and get them out of the current difficult situation they're in.
Frank Uciardo, TRT World, thank you for doing this press conference here. Recently, the Iraq Resistance Coordination Committee rejected any discussion of disarmament. How do you believe this will affect future stability of the nation? And does this present a real major problem in the general safety and operating in Iraq?
I think on that one, there's been quite some positive step taken in the previous government to bring all arms under the control of the state. And I believe that the fact that Iraq managed to have a dialogue and work with this group to stay out of the regional tension is a very positive indicator that there are ongoing discussion and dialogue to bring all weapons and arms that are not under the control of the state to come under the state. So currently, I think there are discussion, but again, the formation of a new government will probably delay that process, but I hope that the future government will give this more priority.
What about, do you have any concerns about regional terrorism activities?
There are concerns. Of course, there are some cells of ISIS that are operating in Iraq, and I think Iraqis and the coalitions have done an incredible job to address that and to eliminate some of the threats. But of course, yes, there are still threats in the region, and Iraqi security forces, I have to say, have been there for over 3.5 years, are increasingly more confident and capable to deal with terrorism issues.
Thank you. Adla?
Adla Masood, The National. You mentioned there were 23,000 people still in the Al-Hol camp.
No, I said they've returned.
Oh, they returned. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe 2,000-3,000.
2,000.
Yeah.
Are these families that are linked to ISIS or ISIS fighters?
It's very difficult. It's a mixed group, and again, the fact that we still have some of these remaining, these are probably the most difficult cases. Now, the Iraqis usually do again, in coordination with coalition, but also with the SDF, they send teams and they look at the profile but usually the majority of these are not necessarily proven ISIS fighters. These are families who allegedly have been associated. So that's why it's easy to bring them in. Now, Having said that, there are still some Iraqis who are in detention centers in the northeast Syria, and those, again, are a process that we're not that involved. That's between the Iraqi security forces and also the Syrian, especially SDF, on how to transfer those detainees, which are primarily ISIS fighters.
Thank you. We'll see, and then we'll close it out.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the status of the law that was passed last year regarding the marriageable age of girls as young as 8. Has that gone into effect, and what are the ramifications? Thanks.
Yes, let me provide some clarification on it, because that generated quite a lot of media attention and also concern. Now, Iraq, the Iraqi parliament put an amendment proposal to amend the 1959 law that was there during the previous governments. And this was actually per the Iraqi constitution, every religious sect is allowed or entitled to develop its own personal status code. So this was more related to the Shia Jafariya code. And we were very much involved, I have to say, as the UN, to make sure that the provision on the minimum age of marriage is still the same, remain as the 1959, which is 18 years of age. And with, in exceptional cases, 15 again, I don't want to go into the detail. There are some psychological assessment and consent of the parent to look at that. But primarily, the law remains the same. That law was passed in the parliament last year, and that law also recommended a code to be developed, and that code was also developed. Now, I don't want to go into the detail. There are some positive elements to the law, of course, and there are also concerns to make sure that, especially on inheritance and custody of the child and so forth. But it's also, I think one of the provisions is that couples can opt in or opt out of this code, because there are other religious sects and minorities and others that exist and live in Iraq, and they will have to also not be affected by this law.
Yeah, sorry, one more, we'll squeeze in one more. Go ahead, Efrat.
Thank you. Effie Lacter from Fox News Digital. We've seen recent reports from the last few days that there are Iraqi militias that might join the Iranian regime in repressing the demonstration. Is that something that you worry will have a regional effect, what's happening right now in Iran and Iraq as well?
I actually don't have any information on that, so I'm sorry I can't answer that.
Maybe.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.